I received the divorce papers by email while I was still walking through the scorching desert dust. 13 years of marriage swept away in a few cold lines, locked inside a simple PDF file. My name is Elias Moreau, 42 years old, Staff Sergeant in the 117th Airborne Division. I had been deployed for 4 months near Diraction, a dusty town on the edge of Afghanistan, when Claire, my wife, decided she was done with me, with us. The subject line of the email was brutally ordinary. Let's be adults about this. The body of the message, just 3 clipped sentences. She had already started the process, already emptied our joint account. Worse, she had already moved her new partner, Martin, into our house in Riverbend, the small town where every street was familiar to me. I read the email twice, closed my laptop, then went to shower in the communal stalls, the lukewarm water trickling down my neck like it was trying to wash away an invisible burn. Then I put on my uniform for guard duty without a word, without a single gesture betraying the storm inside me. That night, back on my metal bunk, I replied with one word: understood. No pleading, no complaints, no anger. Just silence that said it all. My bunkmate Harris briefly looked up from his novel. "You good, man?" he asked in a flat voice. "Yeah, just some stuff from home," I answered. He nodded and sank back into his book. In the Army, you know when to keep quiet. The truth is, I wasn't surprised. 6 months before my deployment, the signs were already there. Small, but unmistakable. Claire never asked how my day had gone anymore. She came home later from her job as an assistant in a dental office. She claimed she was going to gym 3 times a week, but her hair was always flawless, her makeup untouched. New clothes kept appearing in our closet, new friends whose names and faces I didn't know. And above all, her phone had become a vault. Passwords changed, notifications wiped. I didn't shout, I didn't snoop through her things. That's not my way. But I wasn't blind either. So I prepared myself quietly, the way you plan a mission. I rented a small storage unit on the other side of town. I placed my most valuable papers there: my birth certificate, our marriage license, the deed to the house I had bought with my military loan, paperwork for my benefits. I also locked away my grandfather's watch and my mother's silverware, fragile relics of my family. Then I opened a discreet account at another bank. Every month, I funneled a small part of my pay into it. Not enough to raise Claire's suspicions, but enough to make sure I wouldn't have to start from zero if everything collapsed. I remember her cold embrace at the airport the day before my deployment. "Stay alive, okay?" she said in a dry, almost administrative tone, as if she were saying goodbye to a colleague rather than a husband heading off to war. Her eyes were dry. No tears. I should have known then. But part of me still wanted to believe I was wrong. I wasn't wrong. What she didn't know was that I was ready. And what she never understood was that I don't start battles. But when they come, I finish them. I met her in the summer of 2010 at a barbecue hosted by a friend. I was back between rotations and staying with my buddy Lucas in Riverbend. Her name was Claire, a nursing student who had eventually chosen an administrative job in a dental office because, she said, she wanted less stress. 8 months later, we were married. She claimed to be proud of my service, even though she never truly understood why I did it. Her father ran a small local bank. Her brother was a pharmacist. No military ties in her family. Sometimes she'd joke, "When you get a real job," without realizing the Army wasn't a phase for me, it was a life. We bought the house in 2014. Modest 3 bedrooms, a small yard, a swing that creaked in the wind. The mortgage was secured with my VA benefit, so only my name was on it. Out of habit, out of tradition, I added her to the title because to us, as a married couple, sharing meant everything. My father died a year after our wedding, a heart attack in the middle of winter while he was shoveling snow. My mother passed 3 years later, lung cancer that shocked us all. She had never smoked. They left us a modest sum, not life-changing, but enough to pay off Claire's student loans and leave us a small cushion. I deployed for more times in those years, twice to Iraq, twice to Afghanistan. Each time I came home, something in her had withered a little more, like a painting cracking under too much sun. One day, she sighed and told me she hadn't signed up to be a military wife. She was tired of being alone. I didn't try to stop her. The Army was where I knew I belonged. My men depended on me. I had a role, a place. By 2019, things had gotten worse. At first, small hints. Irritation when I called during her girls' nights out. Stories about a friend who had found happiness after a divorce. Remarks about our differences that soon turned into reproaches. I suggested couples therapy. She brushed it off as a phase. Then came the late nights at work, weekends away with friends I had never met, credit cards running hot, and a gym membership she barely used. I should have confronted her, but that's not how I operate. My father taught me to weigh my words, to strike only when necessary. So I watched. I prepared quietly. When that email arrived in the desert, it felt like confirmation of a plan that had been unfolding for months. 2 weeks later, in the base mess hall, a banking notification hit me like a blow. Withdrawal of $8,500. Balance of the joint account, $212.37. Our savings, $47,000 built up patiently, gone. Transferred elsewhere. Murphy, a buddy from the squad, glanced over my shoulder. Bad news? Just some account crap, I muttered, locking my phone. That night, I called the bank from the base's phone room. Claire had been at it for weeks. Small withdrawals at first, then larger sums. The major transfer started the day after I deployed. I hung up and just stood there in the hallway, listening to the laughter and phone calls of other soldiers, fragments of ordinary lives, while mine was burning down. That's when Harris found me. I don't usually open up about personal matters, but Harris had once saved my life in Kandahar. I told him everything slowly, stripped of emotion. She'd emptied the accounts, sent the divorce papers by email during my patrol, and her new partner was living in our home. He didn't bother with consolations. He asked one thing, "What's your plan?" I didn't have one yet, but instinct took over. That night, I logged into our home security system from my laptop. Somewhere thousands of miles from my house, I watched the life we had shared unfold without me. A strange van parked in the driveway, a man walking our dog, drinking from my mug, wearing my team sweatshirt, and Claire, laughing in the kitchen I had renovated with my own hands. A cold sensation went through me, not anger exactly, more like surgical clarity. I closed the laptop, pulled out my notebook, calls to make. Gabriel, the Army lawyer who had become my friend and advisor, checked the terms of the VA loan, request emergency leave, secure my pension protections. I was no longer sad, no longer furious. I was focused, methodical, like preparing for a mission. At 0500 before shift change, I sent Gabriel a message. Need a lawyer. Discreet. Urgent. His reply an hour later was short. Call on secure line. When I hung up after that call, I had a plan. No shouting, no confrontations. Let their own actions collapse on them. 2 months later, back on American soil without warning, I didn't call Claire. I checked into a motel in downtown Riverbend under a false name and met Gabriel at a small diner out of sight. He slid a bundle of documents across the booth. Among the statements was a refinancing application for our house, signed with a hand trying to imitate mine, but poorly. The middle initial wrong, the pen pressure betraying a stranger's grip. She tried to forge your signature to pull $30,000 out of the equity, Gabriel said. She listed her partner as co-applicant. The room spun for a moment. Then he added, her partner has a record, 2 DUIs and a fraud case back in 2019. Options? Several. But the first question was simple. What did I want? I wanted what was mine, and I wanted accountability. I went to the bank, confronted the loan officer with my military ID and my real signature. The employee, pale, promised to take it seriously. I filed a report with the county police, contested the refinance as fraud, and had it officially recorded that nothing could be altered without my presence. 2 days later, a call from Gabriel. The bank had frozen the funds, but some had already been drained, about $14,600. When the officer showed me the list of transfers, one name kept appearing. Derek Sutter, a realtor specializing in fast cash sales. Gabriel dug deeper. Derek had business ties with Romaine Voss, Claire's partner. 3 deals together in the past 2 years. This was no longer just marital betrayal. This was an operation, a pattern targeting military families. Through Gabriel, I contacted the FBI Financial Crimes Division. The case crossed state lines, involved VA loans, and had an organized dimension. The agents took it seriously. Meanwhile, I stayed in the shadows, watching and documenting, gathering proof and recordings. One morning from the motel, I forwarded access to our home cameras to the FBI office with a short message. It's happening now. Minutes later, I watched familiar walls invaded by federal agents on the live feed. Derek Sutter and Romaine Voss were arrested in our living room, cuffed, carrying boxes stuffed with documents. Agent Navarro and Agent Clark took my statement. They spoke of conspiracy, wire fraud, an attempt to sell property under false pretenses. Don't confront her, Navarro told me. Let us investigate. I listened. I watched Claire standing on the lawn, her hands over her mouth, as agents carried boxes out of the house like they were looting the memories of our life. 13 years, reduced to cardboard. The investigation proved broader than I had imagined. Derek and Romaine had targeted other military families. Derek supplied the cash-ready buyer. Romaine scoped out the targets, gained their trust, then pushed for refinances or equity withdrawals. A relentless mechanism. Several victims had already lost their savings. Prosecutors built a solid case. Romaine and Derek took plea deals, revealing a wider network in exchange for reduced sentences. The names of accomplices fell one by one, like dead leaves carried off by the wind of the inquiry. Claire later claimed, during hearings, that she hadn't understood the full extent of the scheme, that she had been convinced I had hidden money or planned to leave her with nothing. Maybe some of what she said was true, maybe not. She signed restitution papers, renounced any claim to the house, and agreed to return the stolen funds. In exchange, I chose not to press criminal charges against her. The divorce was finalized 6 months after that email from Diraction. No-fault divorce, clean separation. The system did its work. Romaine received a significant sentence for fraud and identity theft. Derek received an even heavier sentence. The federal agency told me 11 other families might recover part of their losses, Thanks to the case we had built, I did not feel triumphant. Rather, relieved that the truth finally came out, that the mechanism hidden behind my own downfall was exposed. I often thought of those other families, men and women who had done their duty in service and, in return, had been stripped of what they owned. A woman from Fort Worth wrote to me a year later, her husband at sea, thanking me for the role I had unwillingly played in uncovering the network. Her letter stayed stuck to the fridge for months, a small light in the dark. I sold the house. I couldn't stay. Every wall breathed betrayal and fatigue. With the recovered money and a bundle of savings, I bought an isolated cabin near Pine Hollow, Montana. 2 bedrooms, 10 acres, a brook that whispers at the back of the yard, the promise of restorative silence. I took early retirement after 20 years of service. My hands, which had once held weapons, now held tools, a saw, a hammer, a plane. I adopted a dog, a German shepherd I named Sentinel or Scout, in my first night still in the war mindset, and began working as a local carpenter. The wood creaks, the boards sing, and every small finished project was a victory over the past. My pension covered the essentials. The rest was reclaimed dignity. Time did its work. I no longer hated Claire. Indifference replaced anger. Then a strange calm. We each went our own way, according to Gabriel. She returned to her home state and found a job at another dental office. Start again, relearn, try to erase the tracks. One evening, a letter from a woman at the base found me. You don't know me, but you saved our home. Thank you. I read it twice and tacked it to cabin wall. Sometimes, when night falls and solitude presses down, I read it again. It's a reminder that something just can arise even from the most painful things. The system worked, for once. Romaine and Derek were arrested and convicted. They sleep now behind bars. As for me, I rebuilt each day slowly away from alarms and sirens. Quiet days, woodworking projects, walks with Scout along the brook, simple friendships with neighbors miles from any commotion. I no longer tried to control everything. I had learned that life doesn't always bend to our plans, but that one can respond with method and strength when betrayed. I no longer wanted to be the man who loses everything and cries. I wanted to be the one who rises, reforms, rebuilds. Sometimes late at night, when the light thins and the wind plays in the pines, I think of the van in our driveway and the coffee mug that was no longer mine. Those images pass like old scars. They don't hurt like they used to. I think of the other families, the letter from Fort Worth, Agents Navarro and Clark, who did their jobs with care. I think of Gabriel, always ready with a dry smile and a sharp opinion. My life now is different, slower, fuller with meaning through simple things. A finished job, a dog returning, the sound of the saw, the murmur of the brook. None of that could be stolen or forged. It is mine, and that is enough. The first months in Pine Hollow were strange. After 20 years of hearing armored engines, the sharp commands over radios, the tense whispers before an assault, I found myself in an almost aggressive silence. In the morning, only the brook and the wind greeted me. I had trouble sleeping. Every creak of wood at night pulled me from bed, rifle in hand, ready to face an enemy that didn't exist. Scout, my dog, played a role I would never have suspected. He sensed my nighttime jolts, placed his heavy head on my leg until I fell back asleep. He taught me patience, attention to simple things, a thrown stick, a joyful return, unwavering loyalty. That dog became my anchor, my companion, my battle brother in a more insidious fight, the one against loneliness. I rediscovered my hands. They were no longer meant to grip a rifle, but to carve, assemble, and smooth. I built my own kitchen table from pine boards. Each cut in the wood reminded me that I could create instead of destroy. Neighbors came to see me, a fence to fix, a barn to straighten, a porch to rebuild. Little by little, I became the county's former soldier carpenter. Days acquire rhythm. Up at dawn, black coffee while watching the sun pierce through the pines, a walk with Scout along the brook, then woodworking until evening. No screens, little news. My world had shrunk, but it finally fit me. Of course, not everything was calm. Memories returned, sometimes at the worst moments. While sawing a beam, I'd relive a patrol in the desert, a metallic sound that sounded far too much like an explosion. While putting away nails, I still heard Claire's laughter in the kitchen. I no longer fought those ghosts. I let them pass, like clouds drifting by. One rainy day, I received an envelope from the court. It contained the final confirmation. The house sold, the funds returned. My name alone appeared as owner of the Little Montana plot. That scrap of paper gave me a sense of victory greater than any uniform ever had. Not against Claire, nor against Romaine or Derek. Against the idea that my life had slipped away from me. One winter evening, while snow covered the cabin, I received a call from an unknown number. "This is Agent Navarro. We want to keep you informed." His deep voice came through the line. Derek and Romaine had been transferred to a federal facility. Their final sentences had just been handed down. 15 years for Derek, 12 for Romaine, with no parole before 8 years. I hung up in silence. No triumph, just a deep breath. Justice had followed its course. I had already turned the page. Today, 3 years later, I sometimes catch myself smiling for no reason. I build a cabin for a young couple. Share a beer with my neighbor after a long day's work. Watch Scout run in the snow. I've learned that true victory isn't in revenge or trials, but in the ability to get back up, to build again, to make room for brighter tomorrows. The silence that once frightened me has become my ally. Every crackle of the fire, every drop from the brook, every groan would reminds me that I am alive, standing, free. And sometimes, in the evening, I tell myself, yes, they tried to break me, but I'm still here. And I won. It was a spring Saturday morning. I had come to deliver an oak table to Pine Hollow's small library, a job I'd taken almost out of curiosity. When I stepped in, my boots covered in sawdust squeaked on the polished floor. Behind the counter, a woman looked up. She must have been in her 40s. Chestnut hair tied simply, glasses perched at the end of her nose. She smiled, not a forced smile, but one that lightened the air around her. "You must be the carpenter," she said. "Yes." "And you the librarian?" "Looks that way." "I'm Elena." We installed the table together in silence, interrupted only by her precise directions. A little more to the left perfect. When I left, she thanked me with a firm handshake, like someone who had learned to manage on her own. The following week I returned, not for the table, but to return a book. I hadn't opened a novel in years, user manuals and military reports. She recommended a book about inner rebuilding after trials. I laughed, thinking she had read me like an open manual. Bit by bit, my visits became regular. I'd drop off a card with peace. She'd give me a book. We spoke little of our past, mostly of the present. Nature, the village, simple things. One evening, while rain hammered the library windows, she closed the last shutter and confided, "My husband left 7 years ago. Cancer. I thought I'd never be able to speak to someone again, without feeling an emptiness. I didn't answer right away. I just nodded, then, almost to spite myself, betrayal emptied me. But I think we end up in the same place, after all. Our silences were not heavy. They were a shelter. Over the months, Elena came to see my cabin. She laughed while petting Scout, who rolled at her feet as if he had adopted her instantly. She helped me repaint the shutters, plant a small garden behind the house. She knew the names of wildflowers. I knew how to mend rusty tools. There was no sudden declaration, no dramatic gesture, just an obvious truth that slowly settled in. One summer evening, sitting by the brook, she placed her hand on mine. I felt my heart, long barricaded, start beating differently, not like in youth, not with the recklessness of illusion, but with the steady strength of someone who had survived and chosen to believe again. Today, my life looks nothing like I once imagined. No big house, no medals displayed on a mantle, no fortune accumulated. Just a solid cabin, a loyal dog, a woman who shares my silences and my laughter. When evening falls, we read aloud by the fire or walk in the snow listening to the world drift into sleep. I know the past will never disappear, but it no longer has the final word. The real triumph wasn't stopping Romaine or Derek, nor recovering my money. The real triumph was rebuilding a life where I once thought there would only be ruins. And sometimes I smile at the thought that, despite everything, I won twice, my freedom and a second chance. The village of Pine Hollow doesn't have much: a gas station, a diner that serves coffee too strong, and a small Saturday market. Elena dragged me there for the first time. She knew every vendor by name, traded smiles and anecdotes. I followed, a little clumsy, used the fading into background. "You always have that serious look," she teased, a basket in her hand. "That's just my natural face. Then I'll have to learn how to soften it." She handed me a bright red apple, bitten straight from the stall, and for the first time in years, I laughed without forcing it. One winter night, I woke in a sweat, gasping, convinced I heard gunfire. Scout barked nervously. Elena, still half asleep, turned toward me, placed her hand on my chest. "Hush, you're not there anymore," she whispered. Her voice carried that firm gentleness, like an anchor dropped in a storm. I felt my muscles ease, my breathing return to normal. The next day, ashamed, I apologized. She simply replied, "I have my ghosts too. We don't erase them. We just learn to tame them." In spring, we decided to build a greenhouse behind the cabin, not out of need, but for the joy of a shared project. I cut the boards. She swung the hammer with surprising energy. By the end of the day, covered in dust, we stood back and watched the structure rise. "See," she said, wiping her forehead. "That's life, building a little each day." I looked at her and understood that, yes, it was exactly that. One day in town, I crossed paths with Claire. It was inevitable. She came out of a shop, older, more tired. Our eyes met for a second. She seemed about to speak, but I didn't slow down. Elena was waiting by the car, a basket of groceries in her arms. I felt no anger, not even sadness, just a calm detachment, as if that scene belonged to another life. Driving back to Pine Hollow, the landscape rolling past, I knew I was truly free. One summer, the library organized a public reading night. Elena convinced me to read an excerpt from an old mission journal I had kept. My voice trembled at first, but seeing the attentive faces of the villagers, I steadied. At the end, someone clapped, then others, until the whole room applauded. Elena looked at me with that quiet pride that makes you want to believe in yourself again. Today, our greenhouse overflows with tomatoes and basil. Scout is aging but still sharp-eyed. The cabin is transformed. Books everywhere, tools neatly arranged, traces of a life shared. Sometimes, sitting on the porch, I watch the sun sink behind the pines and think about the path I've traveled, the betrayal, the loss, the solitude, then the patience, the silence, the rebuilding, and finally, the meeting. Life didn't give me back what was stolen. It gave me something else. Proof that after ruins, stronger foundations can be laid, not on illusion, but on truth, resilience, and sincere love. And every evening, when Elena sits beside me and Scout rests his head on my knees, I tell myself that it is here, in this simplicity, that my greatest victory lies.